The fluorescent lights burned like judgment. Louise Franklin's eyes snapped open. The world swam. White ceiling, beeping machines, the antiseptic smell of survival. His throat was sandpaper. His abdomen screamed with a pain he didn't understand. But his rage, that was crystal clear. "My phone." His voice came out cracked, ruined. "Where's my phone?" Nurse Anna Horn stood at the foot of his bed, clipboard in hand, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Franklin, you just came out of surgery. You need to— I need my phone!" He tried to sit up. Agony exploded through his side. He didn't care. "That woman, Aaliyah, she abandoned me, left me to die while she—" He gasped, clutching the bed rails. "I'm going to fire her. I'm going to make sure she never works again. I'm going to— Mr. Franklin." Something in the nurse's voice made him stop. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was pointing to the bed beside him. Luis turned his head, and the world ended. Aaliyah Manning lay motionless under a warm yellow light. IV tubes snaked into her arm. Surgical bandages wrapped her abdomen, the same location as his own wound. Her face was peaceful, unconscious, vulnerable in a way he had never seen in 10 years. "What?" The word caught in his throat. "What happened to her?" Nurse Anna's voice was quiet, final. "She gave you her kidney, Mr. Franklin." Louis stared at the woman he had screamed at, belittled, fired, the woman who had just saved his life. "No." His hands rose to his face. "No, no, no." Cut to black. "You think you know what happened? You don't. The next 40 minutes will show you a love so quiet, so sacrificial, that most people never even notice it exists. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? And type silent hero if you know someone who gives without ever asking for recognition. Let's begin. 4 weeks earlier, the penthouse sat 62 floors above Manhattan like a throne above peasants. Glass walls, Italian marble. Art is worth more than hospitals. Every surface gleamed with the cold perfection of a man who had spent 55 years turning money into a fortress against the world. Louis Franklin stood at the window, watching the city crawl beneath him like insects. His reflection stared back, gaunt, gray, the face of a man who had conquered everything except time. Behind him, the elevator chimed. Aaliyah Manning entered without a sound. She moved through the penthouse the way she had for 10 years, invisible, efficient, anticipating needs before they became demands. Black uniform pressed, hair pulled back, eyes that saw everything and revealed nothing. She set the coffee tray on his desk. "Your morning coffee, Mr. Franklin." Louis didn't turn from the window. He lifted the cup, sipped, then his face twisted. "What is this?" "Colombian blend, sir. Your usual—" "It's cold." "Sir, I just brewed it. The temperature should be—" "Are you arguing with me?" Louis turned now. His eyes were ice picks. "Are you telling me I don't know the difference between hot and cold coffee?" Aaliyah's expression didn't change. 10 years had taught her that storms passed faster when you didn't feed them. "No, sir, I apologize. I'll brew a fresh pot immediately." "You'll do more than that." Louise set the cup down with a crack that echoed through the marble tomb. "You'll remember that I pay you to do one thing correctly. One thing. And if you can't manage that—" He stopped. His hand flew to his mouth. A cough tore through his chest. Wet, violent, wrong. He turned away, shoulders hunching, his whole body convulsing with the effort to suppress it. Aaliyah stepped forward. "Mr. Franklin, are you—" "Get out!" She stopped. Louise's hand dropped from his mouth. In his palm, hidden from her view, a smear of red. Blood. "The coffee," he said, his voice controlled again, the mask rebuilt. "Fix it, and don't come back until you can do your job properly." "Yes, sir." Aaliyah collected the tray. Her movements were smooth, unhurried, dignified in a way that money couldn't buy and cruelty couldn't break. At the elevator, she paused. "Mr. Franklin?" "What?" "I hope you feel better." The doors closed before he could respond. Luis stood alone in his fortress. He looked at the blood in his palm, at the coffee cup he'd barely touched, at the city that had given him everything except someone who would stay. The cough came again. Harder this time, doubling him over, leaving him gasping against his desk like a drowning man. He wiped his hand on his $4,000 pants and straightened his spine. "It's nothing," he told himself. "You've survived worse." But the blood didn't lie. And somewhere beneath the rage and the pride and the 62 floors of glass and marble, Luis Franklin knew the truth he would never admit. He was dying, and he was completely alone. 3 days later, Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital. The doctor's office smelled like bad news. Luis sat in a leather chair that cost more than most. People's cars, his $200,000 watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. Across the mahogany desk, Dr. Richard Chamberlain, the best nephrologist money could buy, studied a file as if it contained a death sentence. It did. Stage 4 kidney failure. The doctor's voice was clinical, detached. Both kidneys are functioning at less than 15% capacity. Based on your current rate of decline, you have approximately 6 weeks. Luis blinked. 6 weeks until what? Until you need to be on permanent dialysis. Dr. Chamberlain closed the file. Or until you receive a transplant. Fine. Luis straightened his tie. Schedule the transplant. Mr. Franklin, it doesn't work that way. Make it work that way. Luis pulled out his checkbook. I'll pay whatever it costs, double, triple. Name your price. This isn't about money. Everything is about money. Dr. Chamberlain leaned back in his chair. 23 years of delivering impossible news had taught him patience. It had also taught him that men like Luis Franklin were the hardest to reach, and the loneliest when death finally knocked. You need a living donor, Mr. Franklin. Someone whose kidney is a biological match. Someone willing to undergo major surgery and give up an organ for you. He paused. That's not something you can purchase. I'll get on the list, the transplant list. You're already on it. You're number 847. The average wait time is 5 to 7 years. Luis's face went pale. I don't have 5 years. No, you don't. Silence filled the room like smoke. Luis stared at the file on the desk. His file. His death, printed in black and white, stamped with dates and statistics and the cold mathematics of mortality. There has to be another way. There is. Dr. Chamberlain folded his hands. Family, friends, someone who loves you enough to give you a piece of themselves. He studied Luis's face. Is there anyone like that in your life, Mr. Franklin? The question hung in the air. Luis opened, his mouth to answer. Nothing came out. Later that evening. The penthouse. Aaliyah stood in the hallway outside Luis's study, a dinner tray in her hands. She had come to announce the meal, but the door was cracked, and through the gap she could hear him on the phone, his voice different from what she'd ever heard it. Broken. I don't care what it costs. Find me a donor. Private channels, international. I'll pay 5 million, 10 million, whatever it takes. A pause. What do you mean, illegal? I'm dying. Do you understand that? I am dying, and you're talking to me about legality? The phone hit the wall with a crack. Then silence. Then something Aaliyah had never heard in 10 years. Sobbing. She stood frozen in the hallway, the tray growing cold in her hands, listening to the most powerful man she knew weep like a child. And in that moment, Aaliyah Manning made a decision. She pulled out her phone and searched. How to become a kidney donor. 1 week later. 11:47 p.m. The penthouse was drowning in darkness. Luis sat in his study, a bottle of 50-year-old scotch beside him, a glass trembling in his hand. The city glittered beyond the windows. Millions of lives, millions of stories, and not one of them would notice when his ended. He'd made 37 phone calls this week, 37 people who owed him favors, who had smiled at his parties, who had called him friend when they needed his money. None of them had called back. The glass shattered against the wall. Aaliyah appeared in the doorway. She carried a small tray, a porcelain teapot, and a single cup. No sugar, no lemon, just the chamomile blend she'd learned he needed on nights when the demons won. "I didn't ask for tea." "No, sir." She set the tray on his desk. "You didn't." "Then why are you here?" "Because you need it." Luis laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that echoed off the marble like a death rattle. "What I need is a kidney. Can you bring me one of those on your little tray?" Aaliyah poured the tea. Steam curled upward, catching the light from the city below. "No, sir, I can't." "Then you're useless." He grabbed the bottle and poured another glass with shaking hands. "Just like everyone else. Just like—" "Why do you do that?" Luis froze. In 10 years, Aaliyah had never interrupted him, never questioned him, never pushed back against his cruelty with anything but silence. "Do what?" "Push people away." Her voice was calm, unafraid. "Before they can leave, you make them want to, and then you tell yourself you were right all along. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been alone in this apartment for a week." She met his eyes. "I know your phone hasn't rung once. I know you sit in this chair every night drinking, waiting for someone to care enough to stay. Stop. I know you're terrified, Mr. Franklin, not of dying." She stepped closer. "Of dying alone." The glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the carpet without breaking. A soft thud that somehow sounded louder than the shattering had. Luis stared at her. His eyes were red. His hands were trembling. The mask he'd worn for 55 years was cracking, and beneath it was something he'd hidden from the world his entire life. Fear. "Why are you still here?" His voice was a whisper now, broken. "Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves. Why haven't you?" Aaliyah held his gaze. "Because someone has to stay, Mr. Franklin." The silence stretched between them, fragile, dangerous, teetering on the edge of something neither could name. Then Luis rebuilt the wall. "Get out," his voice hardened. "Take your tea and your psychology and get out." Aaliyah nodded once. "Good night, Mr. Franklin." She left the tea on his desk and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. "For what it's worth," her voice was soft, "I don't think you deserve to die alone. No one does." The elevator doors closed. Luis sat in the darkness, staring at the tea he wouldn't drink, feeling the truth of her words, settle into his bones like poison. Then he wept. The next morning, Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital. Aaliyah sat in a sterile waiting room, filling out forms she didn't fully understand. Organ donor compatibility testing, living kidney donation questionnaire, emergency contact information. A nurse called her name. "Ms. Manning, we're ready for your blood work." Aaliyah stood. She didn't hesitate, didn't second guess, didn't think about the man who had just told her to get out. She thought about the man beneath the mask, the one who wept alone in the dark. That man deserved to live, even if he didn't believe it himself. 2 weeks later, Luis made a list. He sat at his desk with a legal pad, the kind he used to write billion-dollar deals, and wrote down every name, every person who had ever smiled at him, every hand he had shaken, every relationship he had developed over 55 years of climbing. 43 names. Surely one of them would save his life. Call them Burger 1. Margaret Franklin, ex-wife. 23 years divorced. Margaret, it's Luis. Silence. Then a laugh, cold, distant, wrapped in 2 decades of bitterness. My God, Luis Franklin, calling me. This must be serious. I'm sick, Margaret. Kidney failure. I need a transplant, and I thought... You thought what? That I'd give you an organ? Another laugh. You gave me nothing for 20 years except loneliness and a check every month, and now you want a piece of my body? I'll pay you, whatever you want. Name your price. You still don't understand, do you? Her voice hardened. I didn't leave because of money, Luis. I left because you chose money over us, over me, over your own son. Margaret, please. Goodbye, Luis. I hope you find what you're looking for. Click. Marcus, it's your father. A long pause. When the voice came, it was ice. I don't have a father. Son, listen to me. I'm dying. I have weeks to live unless I get a kidney transplant. I know we've had our differences, but... Differences? A sharp exhale. You missed my graduation, my wedding, the birth of your grandchildren. You sent checks instead of showing up. You bought my forgiveness instead of earning it. I was building an empire for you. I didn't want an empire. I wanted a dad. Marcus's voice cracked. Do you know what I told my kids when they asked about their grandfather? I told them he was dead, because that was easier than explaining that he just didn't care. Marcus, I'm begging you. You're already dead to me, Luis. This just makes it official. Click. Call to Murder 19. Jonathan Price. Business partner. 30 years. Jonathan, it's Luis. I need to discuss something personal. Luis, great to hear from you. What can I do for you? I'm sick. Terminal kidney failure. I need a living donor, and I thought, given our history... Silence. Jonathan? Luis, I'd love to help, really. But I talked to my lawyers, and they advised against any medical entanglements. Liability issues, you understand? Nothing personal. Nothing personal? I made you $100 million. And I'm very grateful, but it's complicated. I'm sure you understand. Click. Calls 2043. Friends, colleagues, acquaintances. I'm traveling that month, so sorry. My doctor says I'm not eligible, you understand. Have you tried the transplant list? I hear they're very efficient. I'll pray for you, Luis. That's the best I can offer. Click, 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 click. Luis stared at the legal pad. 43 names. 43 rejections. He had spent 55 years building a kingdom of glass and gold, and when he needed one person, just one, to sacrifice for him, his kingdom revealed itself for what it truly was. Empty. He swept the pad off the desk. It hit the floor with a sound like a gavel falling. You chose money over us. You're already dead to me. Nothing personal. The words echoed in his skull like a verdict. He had bought smiles. He had bought loyalty. He had bought everything he thought mattered. But he had never, not once, bought love. And now, at the end, he finally understood the price. The elevator chimed. Aaliyah stepped into the penthouse, her purse over her shoulder, a small medical bandage on the inside of her elbow. Luis didn't notice. He didn't notice anything anymore. The next morning. Aaliyah found him in the study. He hadn't moved from the chair. The legal pad lay scattered on the floor. 43 names, 43 failures. Empty glasses surrounded him like tombstones. His eyes were hollow, bloodshot. The eyes of a man who had finally seen himself clearly and couldn't bear the reflection. Mr. Franklin. He didn't look up. Mr. Franklin, I need to speak with you. Then speak. His voice was gravelly. And then leave, like everyone else. Aaliyah stepped forward. Her hands were steady, but her heart pounded against her ribs. The medical bandage on her arm was hidden beneath her sleeve. The test results were in. She was a match. I need to request 2 weeks off, starting Monday. Luis's head snapped up. What? 2 weeks, for a family matter. She kept her voice even, controlled. I've arranged for a temporary replacement. She's excellent. You won't notice the difference. A family matter? Luis rose from the chair, slowly, dangerously. You're leaving me, for a family matter. Sir, it's only 2 weeks. Everyone leaves. He stepped toward her. Everyone always leaves. I should have known you'd be no different. Mr. Franklin, please. Please what? His voice exploded through the penthouse. Please understand. Please forgive me. I am dying, Aaliyah. I have weeks to live and you're abandoning me for some family matter you won't even explain? I can't explain. Not yet. But I promise. Your promises mean nothing. He grabbed the legal pad from the floor and shook it at her. See this? 43 names. 43 people who promised, who smiled, who took my money and disappeared when I needed them. He threw the pad at her feet. And now you, the one person I thought... He stopped. His jaw tightened. Get out. Mr. Franklin, you're fired. Do you understand? Fired. He pointed at the elevator. Take your things, take your family matter, and don't ever come back. Aaliyah stood motionless. She could tell him. Right now. 3 words. I'm your donor. But she knew him. Knew his pride. Knew he would refuse. Would rather die than accept a gift he couldn't repay. So she stayed silent. Goodbye, Mr. Franklin. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, stepped inside. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Luis Franklin. Alone, broken, surrounded by 43 names that meant nothing. She had a surgery to prepare for. 1 week later, the penthouse was rotting from the inside, dishes piled in the sink, crusted, forgotten, growing things that Luis didn't want to name. Curtains drawn against the accusing sunlight. The air was thick with the smell of a man who had stopped, caring whether he lived or died. Luis lay on the couch, an IV port in his arm, a dialysis machine humming beside him like a mechanical vulture. 3 times a week now, 4 hours each session, his blood cycling through tubes and filters, cleaned of the poison his kidneys could no longer remove. It was keeping him alive. Barely. The temporary maid had lasted 2 days. She'd made his coffee wrong, folded his shirts wrong, existed wrong. He'd screamed at her until she fled in tears, and he'd told himself he was better off alone. He wasn't. The silence was unbearable. Every creak of the penthouse echoed like a gunshot. Every shadow looked like Aaliyah, moving through the rooms with her quiet grace, anticipating his needs before he spoke them. He hadn't realized how much space she filled until she was gone. On the 3rd day, he called her. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He called again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He threw the phone across the room. Then he crawled across the floor and retrieved it, because it was his only connection to a world that had forgotten he existed. On the 5th day, he hired a private investigator. Find her, Aaliyah Manning. She worked for me for 10 years. I need to... He stopped. What did he need? To apologize? To beg her to come back? To tell her she was the only person who had ever stayed? I just need to find her. The investigator called back the next morning. She's checked into Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, Mr. Franklin. Admitted 3 days ago. Luis's blood went cold. Admitted? For what? I don't have access to medical records, sir, but she's listed in the surgical wing. Pre-operative care. Surgery? What surgery? I don't know, sir. That's all I could find. Luis hung up. He sat in the darkness, the dialysis machine clicking beside him, and felt something he hadn't felt in 55 years. Shame. Aaliyah was in the hospital, having surgery, and he had fired her, screamed at her. Accused her of abandonment when she was dealing with something serious enough to require an operation. Family matter. What if she were sick? What if she was dying, just like him, and he had thrown her out like garbage? He reached for his phone, dialed the hospital. Manhattan Presbyterian, how may I direct your call? Aaliyah Manning. She's a patient there. I need to speak with her. One moment, please. Keys clicking. A pause. I'm sorry, sir. Ms. Manning is not accepting calls. She's scheduled for surgery tomorrow morning. Surgery for what? I can't disclose that information, sir. Are you family? Luis opened his mouth. Family? He wasn't her family. He wasn't anyone's family. He had made sure of that. No, he whispered. I'm no one. He hung up. And for the first time he prayed, not for himself, but for her. The next morning. 6:47 in Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital. Luis was dying faster than predicted. The dialysis wasn't enough anymore. His body was shutting down. Toxins building, organs failing, the clock running out with every labored heartbeat. Dr. Chamberlain stood at his bedside, a surgical consent form in his hand. Mr. Franklin, we found a donor. Luis's eyes snapped open. What? Anonymous. Living donor. Perfect match. The doctor held out a pen. The surgery is scheduled for this morning. If you consent, we can begin within the hour. Anonymous? Luis's voice cracked. Why would someone... I don't have that information, sir. The donor requested complete anonymity. Dr. Chamberlain's expression was unreadable. All I can tell you is that someone wanted to save your life. Do you accept? Luis stared at the consent form. 43 people had rejected him. His ex-wife, his son, his partners. Every name on that list had looked at his dying body and decided he wasn't worth saving. And now a stranger, someone he'd never met, never helped, never even known, was offering him a piece of themselves. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. Yes. The word came out broken. I accept. He signed his name with trembling hands. Luis counted backward from 10. The anesthesia crept through his veins like warm honey, pulling him down into darkness. The last thing he saw was the surgical lights above, bright, blinding, indifferent to whether he lived or died. 10, 9, 8, he thought of Aaliyah, her quiet grace, her steady hands, the tea she brought without being asked. 7, 6, 5. He thought of the words he should have said, the apology he owed, the decade of cruelty he could never take back. 4, 3. He thought of dying alone. 2. And then there was nothing. Operating room 4, same time. Aaliyah lay on the table, counting her own descent into darkness. The surgical team moved around her with practiced efficiency. Masks, gloves, instruments gleaming under the merciless lights. A nurse held her hand as the anesthesia took hold. You're very brave, Miss Manning. Aaliyah smiled faintly. I'm not brave. I'm just paying a debt. A debt? To whom? But Aaliyah was already gone, slipping into the black, her body surrendering to the hands that would cut her open and remove a piece of her forever. In OR7, surgeons opened Louis Franklin's abdomen and prepared the cavity for a new kidney, a second chance at life he hadn't earned and didn't deserve. In OR4, surgeons opened Aaliyah Manning's abdomen and removed the kidney she was giving freely. No payment, no recognition, no guarantee he would ever know. The organ traveled between rooms in a sterile container, carried by gloved hands, cold and perfect and alive. It was placed inside Luis's body at 9:14 a.m. By 9:47 a.m., blood was flowing through it. By 10:23 a.m., it was filtering his blood, cleaning his system, pulling him back from the edge of death. Louise Franklin would live, because Aaliyah Manning had decided he was worth saving, even when no one else, including Luis himself, believed it. 4:17 p.m. Recovery ward. The fluorescent lights burned like judgment. Louise Franklin's eyes snapped open. The world came back in fragments, beeping machines, white walls, the antiseptic smell of survival. His throat was raw. His abdomen screamed with a pain that felt like being torn in half and stitched back together. But he was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against the 43 people who had decided he wasn't worth saving, he was alive. And the first thing he felt was rage. Nurse Anna Horn stood at the foot of his bed, checking monitors, adjusting IV lines with practiced efficiency. She didn't flinch when his eyes found her. "Mr. Franklin, welcome back." "My phone." His voice was gravel and glass. "Where's my phone?" "Sir, you just came out of major surgery. You need to rest." "I need my phone." He tried to sit up. Agony detonated through his core. White-hot, blinding, the kind of pain that reminds you exactly how fragile a human body really is. He didn't care. "That woman, Aaliyah, she abandoned me." He gasped through the pain, clutching the bed rails with trembling hands. "Left me to die while she dealt with her family matter. I'm going to fire her. I'm going to make sure she never works in this city again. I'm going to—" "Mr. Franklin." Something in the nurse's voice cut through his fury like a scalpel. She wasn't looking at him. She was pointing to the bed beside him. Luis turned his head, and the world collapsed. Aaliyah Manning lay motionless under a warm pool of light. Hospital gown, IV tubes snaking into her arm, surgical bandages wrapped around her abdomen, identical to his own. Her face was peaceful, but pale. Drawn. The face of someone who had given everything and had nothing left. "What?" The word caught in his throat like broken glass. "What is she doing here?" Nurse Anna's voice was quiet. Final. Absolute. "She was your donor, Mr. Franklin." Luis stopped breathing. "The kidney inside you right now, the one that saved your life, came from her." The nurse stepped closer, her eyes holding his with something between pity and accusation. "She checked herself in 3 days ago, underwent all the testing, matched perfectly, and this morning while you were in OR 7, she was in OR 4, having her kidney removed." "No." Luis shook his head. "No, that's impossible. She asked for time off. She said it was a family matter." "You were the family matter." The words hit him like a fist to the chest. "She couldn't tell you because she knew you'd refuse. She knew your pride would rather let you die than accept a gift you couldn't repay." Nurse Anna's voice hardened. "So she did it anonymously, without recognition, without thanks, without any guarantee you would never know." Luis stared at the woman in the next bed, the woman he had screamed at, belittled, blamed for cold coffee and imagined failures, the woman he had fired in a fit of paranoid rage, accusing her of abandonment, the woman who had just given him a piece of her body. "How long?" His voice cracked. "How long has she been planning this?" 3 weeks, since the day after your diagnosis." The nurse checked Aaliyah's IV. "She started the donor testing process before you even began making your phone calls. Before the list, before the rejections, before 43 people had told him he wasn't worth saving. She had already decided he was." Luis's hands rose to his face. The sobs came without warning, ugly, heaving, torn from somewhere so deep he didn't know it existed. 55 years of walls. 55 years of buying people instead of loving them. 55 years of believing that money was the only thing that mattered. And the woman who had saved him wanted nothing, absolutely nothing, except for him to live. "I'm sorry." The words came out broken, shattered. "I'm so sorry." Aaliyah didn't answer. She couldn't. She was still unconscious, fighting her own battle, recovering from the surgery that had saved his worthless life. Luis reached out, across the gap between their beds, and took her hand. For the first time in 10 years. Day 1. Luis refused to be moved. The doctors tried, the nurses tried. Hospital administration sent 3 different people to explain that patients couldn't simply relocate themselves to another patient's bedside. Luis wrote a check for $2 million to the hospital's cardiac wing. They stopped trying. He sat in a chair beside Aaliyah's bed, his own IV stand wheeled over, his surgical wound screaming with every movement. He didn't care. Pain was nothing. Pain was the least of what he deserved. She hadn't woken up yet. "Complications from the surgery," Nurse Anna explained. "Her body is recovering. She just needs time." Time. Luis had spent 55 years treating time like an enemy, something to be conquered, optimized, converted into money. Now he would give every second he had left just to see her open her eyes. He held her hand. It was the first time he had touched her in 10 years. The first time he had touched anyone with something other than a handshake or a signature. Her fingers were calloused, working hands, hands that had scrubbed his floors and folded his shirts and carried his coffee and never once asked for anything in return. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm not leaving." Day 2. He didn't sleep. Every time his eyes closed, he saw her face. Not peaceful like it was now, but the way it had looked when he fired her. The quiet dignity, the acceptance, the complete absence of surprise, as if she had always known he would hurt her eventually. And she had saved him anyway. Why? The word escaped before he could stop it. "Why would you do this for me?" The machines beeped. The IV dripped. Aaliyah didn't answer. "I don't understand." His voice cracked. "I treated you like nothing. Less than nothing. I screamed at you over coffee. I blamed you for everything wrong in my life. I made you invisible for 10 years. He squeezed her hand, tighter. "And you gave me your kidney, a piece of your body, a piece of your life." Tears streamed down his face. "Who does that? Who gives everything to someone who gave them nothing?" Silence. Luis lowered his head to the bed rail and wept. Day 3. 3:47 m. The hospital was quiet. Luis sat in the darkness, Aaliyah's hand still clasped in his, talking to fill the silence she had left behind. "I never told you about my mother." His voice was hoarse, raw. 3 days without sleep had stripped away everything except the truth. "She was a maid too. Cleaned houses in Queens when I was a boy. Worked 16-hour days so I could go to school. So I could become something." He stared at Aaliyah's face. Peaceful, patient, waiting. "She died when I was 19. Heart attack. Worked herself to death in some rich family's kitchen while they were on vacation in the Hamptons." His jaw tightened. "I swore I would never be powerless like that again. I would never depend on anyone. I would buy the world before I let it hurt me." A bitter laugh escaped his chest. "And I did. I bought everything. The penthouse, the company, the politicians and the doctors and the friends who smiled at my parties." He shook his head. "But I couldn't buy what mattered. I couldn't buy my wife's love, or my son's forgiveness, or one single person willing to save my life." He lifted her hand to his forehead. "Except you." The words hung in the air like a prayer. "You saw me, Aaliyah. The real me. The monster beneath the money. And you stayed anyway." His voice broke completely. "Why? Why did you stay?" The machines hummed. The clock ticked. and somewhere in the space between heartbeats, Aaliyah's fingers moved, just slightly, just enough. Luis's head snapped up. Her eyes were open. Aaliyah's eyes found his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The machines beeped. The IV dripped. The world outside continued spinning, indifferent to the two people suspended in this small room, separated by 10 years of silence and bound by something neither could name. Then Aaliyah smiled. Weakly, painfully, but real. "Mr. Franklin." Her voice was a whisper, dry as dust. "You look terrible." Luis laughed, a broken sobbing sound that tore through his chest. "Don't talk! Don't! Here!" He scrambled to his feet, ignoring the fire in his own surgical wounds. He grabbed the water pitcher from the bedside table, poured a cup with trembling hands, and held the straw to her lips. For the first time in 10 years, Luis Franklin served someone else. Aaliyah drank slowly. Her eyes never left his face, watching him hover, watching him fuss with her blankets, watching the billionaire who had never lifted a finger for anyone adjust her pillow, like it was the most important task in the world. "You should be in bed," she said. "I'm fine." "You just had surgery." "So did you." His voice cracked. "Because of me." Aaliyah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were clear, calm, the same steadiness that had carried her through 10 years of his cruelty. "I made a choice, Mr. Franklin. My choice, not yours." "But why?" The question exploded out of him. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me fire you? Let me scream at you? Let me believe you were abandoning me like everyone else?" "Because you would have said no." The truth hit him like a hammer to the chest. "You would have refused," Aaliyah continued. "Your pride wouldn't have allowed you to accept a gift from your maid. You would have rather died than owed me something you couldn't repay." Luis opened his mouth to argue. Nothing came out. Because she was right. "I don't deserve this." His voice was barely a whisper. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve any of it." Aaliyah reached out, slowly, painfully, and took his hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Mr. Franklin." "How can you say that, after everything I did, the things I said?" "Because I saw you." Her eyes held his. "Not the money. Not the penthouse. Not the man who screamed at me over cold coffee." She squeezed his fingers. "I saw the boy who lost his mother, the husband who lost his wife, the father who lost his son. I saw someone so afraid of being abandoned that he pushed everyone away first." Tears streamed down Luis's face. "I saw someone worth saving, Mr. Franklin, even when you couldn't see it yourself." Luis sank to his knees beside her bed. 55 years of walls, 55 years of armor, 55 years of believing that money was the only protection against a world designed to hurt him. And it all crumbled at the feet of a woman who had given him everything and asked for nothing. "Luis," he whispered. Aaliyah frowned. "What?" "Not Mr. Franklin." He looked up at her through his tears. "Luis. Just Luis." Aaliyah smiled. "Okay, Luis." She squeezed his hand. "Now get back in bed before you tear your stitches." He laughed, and for the first time in 55 years, it didn't sound like grief. 6 months later, the penthouse was unrecognizable. Sunlight poured through open curtains. Fresh flowers sat on tables that once held only legal documents. The walls, once bare, now displayed photographs, real photographs, of real moments, of a real life finally being lived. Aaliyah sat at the dining table, a cup of tea in her hands. Luis emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates of breakfast. He set one before her, sat across from her, smiled. Not as employer and employee, as family. He had signed over half the estate to her. Not as payment. There was no payment large enough for what she had given, but as penance, as promise, as proof that he had finally learned what mattered. She had tried to refuse. He had insisted. "You gave me a piece of yourself," he'd said. "Let me give you a piece of everything else." Louise Franklin spent 55 years buying people. He bought their smiles, their handshakes. Their presence at parties meant nothing. But he couldn't buy a kidney. He couldn't buy forgiveness. He couldn't buy one single person willing to sacrifice for him. Until a maid, a woman he had ignored, belittled, and fired, gave him the only thing money could never purchase: a second chance. She didn't do it for a reward. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because she saw the frightened boy beneath the billionaire's armor. And she decided he was worth saving. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Because every week we tell stories about people who give everything and ask for nothing. Don't miss the next one. Someone in your life might be saving you right now. Make sure you thank them before it's too late.